Now on BBC One, Inside Out, with Paul Hudson.
Tonight, why were mistakes made by a children's heart surgeon not picked up on earlier? And we're here at Harewood House on the search for red kites. Welcome to Inside Out, I'm Paul Hudson. Last week, a surgeon who operated on children at a Leeds hospital for more than a decade was struck off. But why weren't his mistakes picked up on earlier?
They were defensive to an extreme level, which ended up in them actually disguising the problems.
In other words, lying.
Yes, I think, to be blunt about it.
Also tonight, the busing generation. We meet Black and Asian children sent to school miles away from home in a 1960s social experiment.
I was always looking at the others thinking, well, how do I become like them?
And later in the programme, amazing footage of these fabulous birds of prey. Now, a surgeon who operated on children with heart defects for more than a decade has been struck off. But tonight there are claims that the Leeds Hospital Trust where he worked covered up his incompetence because they were fighting to keep the Children's Heart Unit open.
Nihal Weerasena was a senior surgeon at Leeds Childrens Heart Unit, operating on both children and adults with congenital heart defects. But last week it was found by a medical tribunal that he was not competent to do the job. He will never work as a doctor again.
If there was any question about his conduct or his practice and the level of competence that he had, then he should have been stopped.
Mr. Weerasena worked at the Leeds General Infirmary from 2002 until he was stopped from operating in 2013. But he continued to be paid his consultant salary for the next 3 years. The 7 cases heard last week by the Medical Practitioners Tribunal dated from 2008 to 2012. So why wasn't he stopped from operating sooner? At the time, the Leeds Children's Heart Unit was under threat of closure.
I think they were terrified that the service would be removed from the hospital and that would then be a big blight.
Helen Burton lives in York. Her daughter Eve was 7 when she went to Leeds for an operation to replace her right ventricle in March 2012.
She'd become breathless at school and it had stopped her from running around and with her friends and skipping and so on. So she knew it would make her better and she couldn't wait to get better and go back to all the things that she was doing with her friends.
Eve's surgeon was Nihal Weerasena, and hers was one of the 7 cases heard by the tribunal last week. It heard that he failed to vent Eve's heart during a crucial phase of the surgery, with catastrophic consequences. Eve never woke up.
I don't think anyone would expect these people to not be, 100% competent at the job that they're doing. But afterwards, can't really express how I felt.
But we know that Nihal Weerasena had been making mistakes long before he came to operate on Eve. The tribunal found he'd made errors during procedures in 2008 and 2010. What do you think about the fact that he wasn't stopped before it came to operating on your daughter?
It should never have happened.
During this period, NHS England had been trying to slim down the number of its heart services. And in 2012, it was announced that Leeds Children's Heart Unit, along with units at 2 other hospitals, was to close. But a few months later, after vigorous campaigning by doctors, patient groups and local politicians, High Court judges ruled that the decision to close the Leeds unit was based on incorrect information.
We are thrilled that the unfair and flawed decision to stop surgery...
Yet just a day later, everything changed again. Sir Bruce Keogh, the medical director of NHS England, ordered the immediate temporary closure of the Leeds unit because of concerns about its mortality rates. The man who'd first raised the alarm over death rates at Leeds Childrens Heart Unit was Sir Roger Boyle, head of the National Institute for Cardiovascular Outcomes Research. It was his job to analyse the mortality data.
We got some early analysis that showed Leeds to be a substantial outlier. The results were so startling that I really had no choice at that point but to draw to the attention of the medical director for NHS England.
But after further analysis of the data, Leeds was declared safe and reopened 11 days after operations had been suspended. Do you think at the time that Leeds was guilty of covering up what was going on in their heart unit?
I think in the broadest sense, yes. I think they were terrified that the service would be removed from the hospital and that would then be a big blight, both in terms of the reputation of the place and also in terms of the financial income.
We now know that Nihal Weerasena had been making mistake after mistake in operations on both children and adults for a number of years, including the one which led to the death of Helen Burton's daughter Eve.
You're placing your child in their hands. So yeah, completely betrayed.
Yet at the time, the hospital flatly denied that Mr Weerasena's suspension had anything to do with death rates, saying,
"We have asked one of our surgeons to stop operating because of concerns raised within the team relating not to his work in children's surgery, but to his adult cardiac work. We are now investigating the facts in relation to these concerns, which are not about adverse mortality or morbidity figures."
But evidence heard at Mr Weerasena's tribunal in Manchester last week looked at 7 cases, 6 of which involved surgery on children. It raises fresh doubts about the Trust's version of events. An email from the Time, released under the Freedom of Information Act, shows that NHS England were well aware of concerns about Mr Weerasena's work.
An investigation of this surgeon's outcome data, use of surgical devices and approach to clinical governance indicated that his performance fell short of that which was expected.
And in fact, only today, Nihal Weerasena himself sent us a letter disclosed to him by the GMC. It was originally sent by 6 of his colleagues to the Trust. The letter says that previous concerns had been raised about him, leading to a number of investigations over a period of years. They also say that there is an apparent excess mortality when compared with his peers. And the date of the letter? 6 days before the Trust put out their statement denying that his suspension had anything to do with death rates. Mr Weerasena told Inside Out that he'd not previously been made aware of concerns about his practice, and that had he known that he was going wrong, he would have learned the lesson from it. The Leeds Teaching Hospitals NHS Trust didn't want to be interviewed, but it told us that the concerns raised in March 2013 had not been fully validated. It said the information about Mr Weerasena's surgical outcomes only came to light during a later review, and that it then referred him to the GMC in 2014. Sir Roger Boyle believes the Hospital Trust's worries about whether the unit would close down led effectively to a cover-up.
They were defensive to an extreme level that ended up in them actually disguising the problems that were present within their organisation from the public, from the media, and particularly from their local MPs.
In other words, lying.
Yes, I think, to be blunt about it, yes.
A senior children's heart consultant told the panel that Mr Weerasena had showed poor clinical practice during operations, and that his post-operative notes left out crucial details about procedures that hadn't gone as planned.
You put all of your trust into medical practitioners, and it's a real betrayal of the trust that you put in them.
The Leeds Teaching Hospitals NHS Trust has reiterated its sincere apologies to those patients and families where significant failings took place in the care provided by Mr. Weerasena. It says it was open and truthful in its statements to the public, media and MPs, and that the concerns raised were taken seriously and the unit temporarily closed. It says a number of independent reviews concluded that the service was safe. At one point, you said that you wouldn't send your child to Leeds for heart surgery. Do you stand by that today?
Not at that, as things were at that time, absolutely, I would not.
What about now?
Now I would be happy, because I think there's no doubt that they're absolutely on a par now with other hospitals around the country.
I just told her that she'd go to sleep and that she wouldn't know anything because she'd be asleep, and that I'd see her when she woke up, and that was it.
The Leeds Teaching Hospitals NHS Trust say that if any families have concerns about the findings of this hearing, they can contact the hospital's Patient Advice and Liaison Service on 0113 206 6261.